Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Any boys and girls? Kids?
Too much echo. There's an echo.
Too much echo. I think, would this be better?
No,
still?
Echo. It's in her.
Too much echo.
Echo.
Sound person? Still on music.
There it is. There we go. That's good.
Okay.
There you go.
So I'd like to welcome you to today's session of Speaker's Corner. By way of introduction, my name is Gabor Zinner. I'm a local lawyer, the founder of this program, and recently the self-proclaimed Grand Mufti of Tompkin Park. Richard, I bet you didn't know that. Who's here for the first time? Anyone? Okay, great. Well, just by way of introduction, Speaker's Corner is a practice, a program, if you will, that's practiced in many countries around the world. It has its origins in London, England, a famous Hyde Park. Have you heard of Hyde Park? So this is, it goes back about 165 years, and it's it's a place where people get up and talk about issues of the day. People can come and bring their soapboxes, and they can rant and rave and get heckled and talk about all kinds of things. So a group of us thought that it would be a good idea to have a similar program going here in Calgary. And I came up with the idea some 5 years ago and approached the City Hall to see if, well, initially just to find out where and how permitting can be gotten for this kind of a program. I actually wrote the mayor and got nowhere, really, until I ran into my very own alderman, Richard Bootmans, who will be speaking today. And he unlocked all kinds of doors. And here we are. This is our third year running. We try to bring topics of relevance, stimulating topics pertaining to, well, all kinds of issues, really. We've had leaders of political parties debate here on the Keystone Pipeline, for example, on the ouster of Mohamed Morsi, and all kinds of issues. And all our debates are archived on YouTube. In any event, today we have a local topic, and we're fortunate to have Alderman Richard Poo. Now, is Alderman is no longer, it's taboo, right? Is it sexist? Who's to say, who's to know, right? All right. I should also mention, Councillor Pootmans, that as I frequently say, that political correctness is not the standard by which we measure Speaker's Corner, the success in Speaker's Corner. Rather, it's the extent to which we can generate stimulating discussion and debate. But I will honor you by referring to you by your proper title, sir. Richard. Richard it is. So Richard was raised in, he'll be speaking to us today about whether or not we should give more money to upgrade city transit. We've been trying to get Richard down for the longest time. We've been trying to get a topic that Richard thought would have some resonance, and this is the topic that he's offered to speak on. Richard was raised in Ottawa and has lived in Calgary since 1979. He was first elected to serve as councillor. By the way, this is part of the charm of Speaker's Corner. He was elected to serve as a councillor for Ward 6 in October of 2010. Since taking office, he's worked with industry, community groups in the city to ensure that ongoing development in the ward is sustainable, affordable, and serves the needs and interests of the communities he represents. Public safety, transportation, and well-built, livable communities are the three key themes that drive the work he does in the ward. And he currently serves on too many committees for me to read out. I'm seeing visually about 10 or 11. I don't know how he does it. Richard earned an MBA in Finance and Marketing at the U of C. He even has Petroleum Landman certification and a BA in Honors Economics and International Relations from Carleton University. Without any further ado, sir, please talk to us about transit and whether or not we should be investing more.
Thank you, Gabor, and thank you, Aaliyah, for setting this up today. Impressive sound system. Gabor, this is your initiative many years ago, so thank you so much for doing this. I used to have 2 retail stores in Mount Royal Village and used to live a block that way on 14th Avenue, so I know this area well. Topic for today is transit. Should we have more of it? What type of transit do we need? First of all, who here wants more transit? Who here doesn't like transit and wishes we just simply build more roads for cars? Oh, I want someone to disagree with me. Oh, perfect, thank you. Yobi might go, oh no, you're against that too. In the inner city, it's pretty easy to convince people to use transit. Out in the suburbs, it's not so easy. Ward 6 that I represent just recently got an LRT extension, the West LRT, which I'm on every day. I love it. We also have created, part of a committee, I'm afraid, a document called The Route Ahead. And the route ahead goes into some detail. You can find it on the calgary.ca website, saying these are the plans for the next 30 years for transit. And it has a lot to do with connecting a hub and spoke network and big circles around the city. But the key thing I wanted to talk about today is, what does the future look like? So everybody here agrees that we need more transportation, more transit services as we grow and expand the city. Yes, thank you. Good news. One of my colleagues, G.C. Carra, made a great observation at council the other day. He said, if we need as many cars for the next million people that are in Calgary as are in Calgary for the first million, we're screwed. We will not survive as a city of 2 million people with as many cars again. It just won't happen. We can't afford it. We were looking at an overpass the other day over Sarcee. $60 million to move cars around for one overpass is what it costs these days. And that will only take a few cars every day. So we're spending so much more per car to move people than we are for moving people in transit. On a new 4-car LRT train, that person will be able to take 800 people to work. One driver, 800 people. That could be as many as 800 cars saved from being on our roads with one 4-car train. And 4-car trains will start sometime later next year. So transit is the way to move cars around. It's the environmental solution. We do not want to choke on our own car fumes much longer. We want to stop having to pave over everything so we can move people around in cars. So transit's the answer. So what sort of transit would you like to see more of? This is participatory now.
LRT.
Where would you like the LRT to go, Gabber?
Well, ideally, as broadly as possible.
Okay, so do you like the east line, what they're going to call the green line, going from the very north boundary of the city, 40 kilometers south to Seaton in the south?
Absolutely. Boston and New York.
I think that's being made right now, right?
Beg pardon?
You're planning that right now?
That's being planned as we speak. It's coming in front of council again tomorrow for federal funding. So that'll cost several $1 billion. So is that the right investment to make?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think that they need to take what they've got right now, make it work more efficient, and take it for 30, 40 years.
Me too.
I'm sorry, some of the things I'm seeing is ridiculous. You'll have 4 number 4s. Some days you'll have 4 number 4 buses coming right in a row, and then the next day you'll be waiting 35, 40 minutes when they're supposed to be running every 15. Well, they need to do something. Well, the times, I mean, personally, like I said, I've been taking it for a long time. Lately, there have been more and more issues on a daily basis with the transit, with the C trains. I've been on during construction downtown. The bus drivers didn't know where the hell they were going in plain English. They weren't given proper information because in the middle of it, they changed it. The city is now doing what's called pop-up construction, which blocks roads off suddenly and causes major havoc for transit. There's no communication between infrastructure and transit. So a lot of the times transit is unaware, something will pop up and the driver's like, I can't go down 4th Avenue, they just closed it on 1st Street. So where am I supposed to go now? And you have stranded pedestrians and the driver has to figure out how to go around 5 miles to get back to where he has to be to his next stop. So that's something, there needs to be more communication within the city departments.
Thank you. Interestingly enough, the roads department and the transit department are in the same business unit, so I'll pass that message along. There's room for improvement. Any other areas people would like to see improvement in the transit system?
I'd love more Uber and Lyft.
More Uber?
Uber and Lyft. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about Uber in a second. I want to come back to that one. One thing I wanted to finish up on as it relates to transit, we'll go to Uber, is as part of the line on the east side of the city, which will be a very expensive investment over probably 2 generations to get there, the thinking is we want to redesign how we live, work, and play. So along, say, pick a number, 25 different stations, the idea is to cluster as much residential, probably high-rise, high density anyway, commercial, recreational activity, live, work, play. And what we want to do is stretch the amenities out so that not every station has a full-on rec center available to it, but maybe the swimming pool is 2 stations down. Maybe the really great shopping is 3 stations the other way, so that you can go to where you need to go to get the things you want for your living, for your family, at one of the stations within a short LRT trip away. So instead of jumping in your car to get groceries, or you want to get a fresh loaf of bread, the best baker is only 1 stop away. You will get on the LRT, go down, get it, and come back. And you won't have to necessarily worry about driving all day long. So this will mean a heck of a lot more efficient way of doing business in terms of the city's need to continually have roads built, plowed, and maintained. The LRT becomes the spine that connects the city. And that's really the long-term vision of how we can make this city work more successfully. Let's go to Uber for a second, because this is a nice contentious subject. So, my policy, my thinking, and I think pretty much everyone at City Hall these days, is we welcome Uber. I'm a latecomer to iTunes. I just got an iPhone, the same one Cabra does, the i6 Plus. It's a great machine. Everybody else, I'm probably the last guy in town to buy an iPhone. So I do like new technologies. I do like iTunes. My problem is basically public safety. The problem with Uber is their insurance policy covers an Uber driver only to the extent that the Uber driver's insurance does.
Who's an Uber driver?
Beg your pardon? Oh, you're coming on?
If anyone has any questions, please put your hand up. If Richard wants to answer them, I will bring the mic to you.
So let's keep going with Uber for a second.
What is Uber? Some of us are really out of it.
Oh, Uber is a service. It's a whole new way of doing business so that you can take your car, go online with an app that allows you to collect business from people that want to dial up saying, I need a ride from Lang's Grocery to 30 miles that way. And that service is put up for bid, and you can go online, get it, and someone will come to you and tell you when. Do you use Uber?
Yeah.
Where you've used it elsewhere in Toronto or?
No, in the States.
In the States. Which city?
Dallas and San Francisco.
And you love it?
Love it.
How do you feel about the safety?
Completely safe. Yeah, I have no fear as a woman, not at all.
Okay, so you're not worried about the driver. Are you worried about an accident at all? The liability?
No, so the drivers go through an actual, I asked about this. So
Yeah.
The drivers actually have to go through a background check, and any driver that gets rated at any point in time on a drive for less than 4 stars actually cannot serve anybody for the rest of the night. So they are very, very picky on who represents their brand.
How about the accident issue though? If your
Yeah,
driver,
that's a cab can get in an accident.
but the cab has commercial insurance, which costs them $3,000 to $5,000.
So where's the risk? Tell me more.
The risk is, so if you're in an accident, let's say
Stop it. Sorry, he's jealous. Sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's sorry. I'll
He's
take
just
this.
nervous. One of the issues our administration and frankly council has, it's okay, he's nervous,
Charlie, stop it.
is if there is an accident, personal insurance policy, personal liability will not cover it because you're using your car for commercial purposes. Your insurance policy becomes null and void. So if you are a passenger in that car and you have a serious accident and require all sorts of coverage for recovery or long-term care, and God forbid, you have no insurance. It gets a little bit more complicated. If the driver, an Uber driver, driving his own car with a paying passenger inside, it's a pedestrian, our lawyers tell us that pedestrian will not have coverage under that driver's policy. It leaves the pedestrian, every citizen in town, potentially very exposed to any kind of liability or any kind of injury they get. So it's a public safety issue.
So don't you think Uber has already thought of this and come up with their own insurance plans for their drivers that they must have?
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
Their insurance policy covers the driver to the extent that the driver's insurance policy does not. Our lawyers told us last week that, in fact, there are examples, and this is why certain Western countries in Europe have banned Uber, because your insurance is null and void if you're using it for commercial purposes. So if you do not have an insurance policy as an Uber driver, Uber will not kick in and cover you. That's the real risk we face. So it's not just the paying passenger who might well want to assume that risk, but pedestrians in town, we believe, and our legal advice is such that that pedestrian, the public at large, is also exposed to that risk. And insurance companies will be very quick to cancel a policy if in fact you are abusing it. And it says so, is that if you're using this car for commercial purposes, paying $1,000 for a personal coverage, but using it for commercial purposes, thereby saving thousands of dollars in coverage, you're not entitled to that coverage. That's why we get very concerned. Not to put too fine a point on it too, Uber does not do a police check, and this, what they're recommending here is they tell us that they will do all sorts of other sorts of web checks and things like that. So the holy grail from city's point of view, police check, vehicle safety check, and insurance cover. And if those three things are in place, which by the way are very expensive, so that's one of the reasons why the local insurance business, the local taxi businesses are very happy. If we establish that as the level playing field, they would welcome Uber with open arms.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of
Yeah.
the insurance.
So
risk.
that's our perspective from the
I'm
city
still
side.
going to use it though.
Well, but it won't. For instance, when they first came to town, they went to a rent-a-car agency, rented cars, hired a few people off the street, and put them in business doing Uber. We take the insurance business and the liability issue and the public safety issue very, very seriously. And as soon as they can comply with that, and I've met with Uber, and we've told them these are the things we need to see. A lot of this is working its way through the courts in Toronto. There's been some high-profile cases, but there are apparently virtually every city in the States is involved in some level. I think there's 2 cities that aren't. And again, I think it's several Western European countries that have banned them for precisely this issue. The problem with this disruptive technology is the shortcut it takes is on the safety side and on the insurance side. So, but a lot of people think the Uber model is going to be a way an awful lot of, if you're a graphic designer or something like that, increasingly, although you're probably already doing that, increasingly your services will be put up in the same way taxi cab services are. And professionals such as Gabber, a lawyer, might well start posting his services in a similar fashion, saying, I can resolve this type of legal problem for you. Gabber's cringing, but all types of professionals might well be starting to post their services and be available in a similar fashion. So this brokerage...
It's called Elance and Odas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it already exists.
But it's going to get increasingly such that we'll be able to look at it and you can bid on the moment. And so it's growing everywhere. And I think Uber's, give them credit for leading the way on that.
Has Lyft done a better job? Have you looked at Lyft?
I have not looked at the Lyft, no. We're aware of it, but we just...
Maybe their system is better. We don't know.
We don't know. No, Uber's the one that we're looking at. I think they're the ones that have the resources to break into the new territories. And if they can cross those bridges for us, terrific.
Another question, Fire.
Sure.
Can you not envision insurance companies adapting to the Uber model to capture more business and to, in fact, develop a new policy that will accommodate a service such as Uber?
That would be a progression, of course. Could easily go that way.
Thanks.
Thanks. Further questions? Talking about transit, Uber.
Where's
bus,
the money coming from?
for which the transit service?
Mm-hmm. Have they got any structure set up for the growth? You're talking about the growth of the next million?
No, well, let's just talk about how transit's supported. Of the $3, you have $3.15 or whatever to $3.25 these days. You pay.
I pay $100 a month.
Okay, fair enough. How much of that, of your $100, do you think covers the cost of your transit service?
100% of it's supposed to.
No, we actually, City Council, elect to have the city taxpayer at large subsidize your fare to the tune of 48 to 52% of the cost.
Oh yeah, I knew the other half came out of one pocket, half came out of the other.
Well, no, it's really important because half comes out of everyone's pocket and not everybody uses transit. So the debate one has at council is to say, hey, what is the public good? And the public good is if we can put 50 people on a bus or 800 people on an LRT train, that takes a lot of people off the roads, keeps them clear for people to drive. So therefore it might be in the public interest to have the public at large help pay for a transit service. So that's the logic that supports it. Now that only pays for the operations. Now an LRT line, the one that we just built out west, was close to $1 billion. The one that we will build from the north to the south will be many, many billions of dollars. So the big issue at council tomorrow is going to be, are we going to go after the federal government funding programs under transit for just the LRT line or 18 other little projects that we'd like to do? So it's a very, very important discussion to have as the city because all those 18 other projects might be very important, but is the big LRT line the one that we want to sink all of our money into? Go for it.
Okay, what about the smart system, the tap cards that have been scrapped, and that was $7 million? Is the city going to try and recoup that money?
That's with the lawyers. I don't know what they're going to do. It's frustrating because it failed the first time. We weren't particularly we were apprehensive about, I was apprehensive about going back with the same company again. They gave us assurances they could supply. The breakdown was loading the cards. They couldn't know it's the same company. They changed names, but it was essentially the same company.
So if Tim Hortons can do it, why can't this company do it?
Well, I'm not sure you can load your Tim Hortons card off a personal computer at home, and that's the thing, the feature that we wanted, and that's what became so difficult. Is the card, each reader recognizing the fact you had just loaded the card the night before for the pass fees.
Interesting. I wasn't aware of that part of it.
That's the complex. That's what they call the functionality. That was the bonus that we wanted to offer people. It became really, really hard to deliver that. So perhaps we should reassess whether we want to offer that level of convenience or not. It's something that we think Calgarians wanted, and we have yet to find a vendor that can provide it.
That would be interesting.
Other questions?
Yes.
Gabber.
It's pretty clear that funding for these mega projects is mammoth. It's necessary, but mammoth, and is it affordable? Has the city considered the financial viability of perhaps floating a municipal bond to raise? And would it be a how should I put it? Could it be a remunerative? Thank you, sir. Proposition for investors.
Yeah, it is in the States because the federal government gives them tax advantages to do such a funding. We would like to look at it that way in Canada. The federal government is reluctant to give us the tax room to do that. But there's a second problem, which is the bigger problem. We already can borrow money for very, very low costs from our very successful provincial government and oil revenues. So we have access to all the low cost money that we want. And it becomes a question of what's the debt capacity of the city. We have about, I think it's about $3.6 billion worth of debt right now. We want to keep that to about 80% of 2 times annual revenues. And we're pushing that limit. We're about 60 some odd percent, I think, at the moment. So do we want to assume more debt as a city? We're growing fast. It's an open question. We have a bit more debt capacity, but at this point, we're going to be chasing after the federal government for transit funding.
Okay, we've got a question over here.
Hey, Councillor. A few thoughts I wanted to share and then a couple of questions. I lived in Toronto. I visited Montreal. I know in Toronto, when you get off a bus, you wait anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes, and you are when you get off the subway, anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes maximum. You are on a bus and you're going where you want. The subway on the weekends runs till at least 4 to 5 a.m. for all the latecomers. It's called the Bloor line. It's not a fun line to be on. It's mostly drunks coming out of the bars, but it runs till 4 in the morning. Quebec the same way. You wait minutes, you're on a bus. Here in Calgary, when I moved here in 2004, I think I've took the bus or the C train maybe as many fingers as I have on both hands. The reason is I can't get there on time. My sister used to work at Deerfoot and 64th by the mall there. She lives downtown. She told me it would take her, and she planned it out, over an hour and a half just to get there one way. That's 3 hours in transit just to get there and back. So, and that is the reason when you look downtown and you see the traffic jam that drives people bananas, and you look at all those vehicles, there is one person generally in each vehicle, because they refuse to take transit. Now, it would make sense there'd be less cars on the road and you get places quicker on a bus if there were less cars. But they're not looking at it that way. They're saying it takes me too long to get to work, I'll take the transit. So it seems to me, and I wasn't here in the early years when they built this city, but it seems to me, just even given the way that where Chinook Mall is, it seems to me that they built the city and then thought about the transit later.
Yes.
And that's bizarre. No, but that's bizarre, because even 20 years ago, we knew we were sitting on this product called oil. We had to have known, or planners should have known, that if that black stuff in the ground, the price of it goes up, people are going to move to this city to remove that oil from the ground. And it blows my mind that there was no forethought on that issue whatsoever.
I would consider this a cultural issue. We love our cars. We have more cars per capita than just about anybody else. We're a low-density city. We're a very low-density city. We've built a city in the suburbs. We have, call it 5-6 units per acre, homes per acre in the west side of the city. Most places around the world, and that's pretty typical for around the city, we have a very, very low-density city built to be supported by cars.
Yeah, but in all fairness, so does Toronto. Toronto, are you kidding
me? Downtown Toronto density?
Well, there's a lot of people who live in downtown Toronto.
Toronto's pretty dense.
No, that's what I mean. Given how many people take transit, they say over 50 to almost 60% of people that work in Toronto take transit. In Calgary, it's less than 30% of people.
Yeah, but close to 50% of the people working downtown are now taking transit every day, and transit is now up to 110 million passengers a year. We're on the right track, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I think your point's well taken. It's a battle. I fight this battle monthly up on the west side from people who do not want to see the area made more dense. We're trying to put density around some of the LRT stations. We're not there yet. We're a very young city. We love our cars. It's a reality. One of the reasons we're very excited about having the Green Line built is that what we'll be able to do is establish concentrations of density around LRT stations, provide the amenities, provide the place to live, provide the place to work, provide the place to play, provide everything that people want to stay in those areas, give them the access to all the services they need along the line. That's the way we're going to build the future. I remember in 1960s going up to the top of the buildings in Toronto and looking out into the horizon even then and seeing clusters of high-rise at all the stations. They're several decades ahead of us. Don't forget, we've grown by the size of the city of Red Deer in the past 4 years. Red Deer, 100,000 people, 80,000, whatever. Took 100 years to get there. What we've achieved in the past 4 years is growing like a Red Deer or a Lethbridge. And before that, in the past 7 or 8 years, we also grew again. We've doubled in size in a generation. We're growing like mad and just catching up to the issues you're talking about now.
I don't think those people love their cars. I think they would have to park the car and pay less insurance. If they could not pay 3 hours of transit. Like if the Alberta Health Services warehouse, which is on Barlow past Barlow East, if you work on there in the midnight shift, you can't get home. They have to send you home in with a taxi check because there is no bus that goes there past 8 o'clock at night. They have 400 people working in that warehouse. So the government's paying young people to work in the midnight shift and giving them taxi checks. So I don't think it's that people like their cars. I think they don't want to sit in for 3 hours.
I agree with you.
When you forethought and you built this, you should have thought about oil was in the ground and it's going to bring people.
Okay, should haves don't work though. Okay, we do have other people who have some questions here. Okay, here you go.
Hi, I'm just wondering, each time there's an increase in the fare, what do we get out of it? Because you can get a return with 90 minutes. Why don't they extend that 90 minutes?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, it would be nice because, you know, what the gentleman's saying, distances now and how, I mean, I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, so I like to think that I can fit in whatever I can in 90 minutes, but if the fare's rising, why don't they extend that?
If you'd like to call my office, so we get you an answer. Or stick around, I can give you my card and give us a call. I'd like to give you a good answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
That is a good point. A lot of people have been complaining about that. 90 minutes, some people think an hour and a half, that's a lot of time. But if, in fact, you have to take, myself, it's happened, where I've had to take the train from Marlborough downtown, take another train, and then take a bus, which took me over 2 hours. So halfway through my fare, I'm not even there yet, and my ticket's no good anymore.
Thank you. We'll check it out.
And we have another question here.
I'd actually say that one comment on Calgary's transit system, for a new city of about 1 million people, I actually think Calgary's transit system is very good.
Oh, thank you.
You compare it to any city in America or anything like that. The thing with transit systems is you can only ever compare a city to other cities its own size. Like a city with 5 million people is always going to have a much better transit system than a city with 1 million. It's just population density. But all things considered, when you're talking about the problems with transit and number of people on it, the real, as you alluded to earlier, the real issue is the urban sprawl. Is basically that Calgary is 50, 60 kilometers north-south, something like that, with only 1 million people. And probably a big chunk of the urban sprawl and driver of it is, if you look at housing costs, it's just way, way, way cheaper to buy a 3-bedroom duplex out in the suburbs than to buy even like an 800 square foot apartment nearer to where you live, nearer to where you work. And I know that, obviously there's a lot of, market factors which are outside of the government's control to do that. I also think one of them is that my understanding is property taxes here are essentially based on the value of the property. while one of the big things you can do to reduce urban sprawl is instead make property taxes based on the value of the land instead. Have any of your thoughts been going into that?
Oh, lots of thoughts of it, yeah. We're not particularly happy with, it's one of the reasons we're chasing after a city charter actually, is we don't think we should be so dependent on property taxes. It's a poor way of assessing what the value is on where people are living and what the costs are of providing services to where everybody lives. So you're absolutely on the right track, and that's why we're looking at all sorts of other different revenue sources.
Infrastructure is his other pet subject, which we were toying which one he was going to play with today. Does anyone else have any more questions? Anyone back on the benches? You guys have any questions you'd like to ask?
We seem to be attracting a crowd.
Okay, just a point regarding that during downtown, during the morning, there are many cars and each car only has one person. I remember seeing that there's a website or an app in Europe called blah 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 car for carpooling, and it's doing very well and has very large sales. So this is something to consider. Another question, one question I had is regarding the bus. I don't know, like, if you consider having smaller buses to work in the night, because when it's 1 a.m. and I see a big bus and it's almost empty, I really feel sorry for all the energy, all the money spent on it.
Two excellent points, thank you. Let's deal with the first one. The city's approach to occupancy is to try a carrot approach as opposed to a stick approach, and reward drivers carrying more than one passenger, more than just one person per car, a high occupancy lane. So we're looking at that for areas such as Crowchild Trail, when we redesign Crowchild Trail, making sure there's high occupancy throughout the length of it. So absolutely, that's a tried and true method that Los Angeles, Toronto, every other city's doing it. As we grow, we'll be definitely getting there. The other piece that I just as an aside is we're also encouraging people to travel off-peak hours. There's capacity in the system, both on transit and in the road systems, a little before the rush hour at 6:37 in the morning and a little after at 8:30 for another half hour. So if your employer or your work lends itself well to going in perhaps a little later and staying a little later, or if really lucky, go in a little later and leave a little earlier, my gosh, that would take a lot of congestion off the road. Working from home, or what they call work shift, working from a Starbucks in a suburban shopping mall or something like that. There's so many other options than everyone catapulting downtown every morning. We have to look carefully at some of those alternatives as well. Relating bus, we're constantly, especially up on the west side, looking at getting the capacity right. In fact, in the evenings now, we've gone to shuttle service, and smaller shuttle bus service as opposed to the full bus, and on weekends as well. Not only for the environmental waste that the larger bus creates, but also because people didn't like the noise, and as you said, the visual of seeing an empty big bus when it only needed 2 passengers. So I would say there's almost a full-time continual effort at what they call right-sizing the capacity. It goes both ways. Sometimes a new subdivision opens up with new demand, and all of a sudden it requires a full-size bus. So there are people, they call it yield management, and there's all sorts of capacity issues. So they're all over that issue as well, but you're exactly right, those are the issues we're looking at.
What about car lanes for multiple?
Well, that's where high occupancy, yeah, actually. Oh, okay, sorry.
To what extent?
To what extent can the ring road be anticipated to reduce congestion?
To a large extent, but it also creates congestion in certain areas as well. So we're looking very carefully at what the ring road will do on the west side, the southwest ring road and the west ring road, and in fact what the delay of the southwest ring road will imply for traffic congestion on the west side of the city, and the impacts will be significant. So we're encouraging the provincial government to proceed with both, please, because it will cost us a lot of money to strengthen Sarcee Trail, Richmond Road, Bow Trail, because those roads are nearing capacity now, or at capacity. If they have to take the Stony traffic out of the southwest, coming out of the First Nations at Sarcee Trail, Glenmore Trail, and Highway 8, that'll be one of the city's most elaborate intersections when it's fully built. We need the ring road to continue to steer people to the west on Highway 8 and on 101st Street.
So it's both a blessing and a curse, is it?
It's an absolutely necessary thing to do to complete the ring road. It's like building a car with 3 wheels and waiting for the 4th wheel to be attached. This piece will not be a ring road unless it's completed. How we get there is going to be complex.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Anyone else? Any questions about the transit system, the infrastructure, the amount of cars on this roads? and how it's all affecting our commutes? Anybody? I'll bring the mic to you. One more for Gabor.
Don't want to monopolize the questioning, but you say there's a debate coming up as to whether or not to invest in the large multi-billion-dollar LRT project or 18 other projects. What are some of the other 18 that are under consideration? And when is the debate going to be taking place?
Tomorrow at Council and on Tuesday as well. Just lots of extensions. One of the sort of building blocks will eventually be 37th Street. How much work do we put into preparing for the 37th Street extension from Westgate? What do we do in terms of, with the hub and spoke system that we have, that inner circle ring that's described in Route Ahead to connect the major institutions, a university, a hospital, connecting those in a different way than the hub and spoke system can now. So right now we go downtown, then we go back out. How about that inner ring, which is the logical next piece to the system? Resources could be started to put into that sooner rather than later as well. So prioritizing these investments is a major challenge, and that's something we'll be debating.
Which way are you leaning?
I want them both. We just don't know at this point. The answer is going to depend on the questions we ask of administration. The big line, the green line, the multi-billion-dollar connector from north to south borders of our city, we have to understand very clearly what the federal government requirements are for the project qualifications. Do they want to see smaller projects that provide certain value throughout the city, or do they want to see one major line? There's a school of thought the federal government is more comfortable looking at a single project and assessing that versus having to analyze 5 different ones that we might high grade and propose and ask them to sort of pick which ones they want to prioritize. There's a consensus amongst some that we're better off prioritizing one for them and putting all our marbles into one bag. And that debate is going to be probably a close vote in council, because you know what, there's no right or wrong answer, and we're trying to anticipate something the federal government might think, but in fairness, the federal government doesn't want to make those decisions for us. They're expecting the local jurisdiction to do that, and if I were Ottawa, I'd be probably saying the same thing.
What is the likelihood?
Oh, we'll get our per capita share under that program. They're looking for major projects in big cities, so I'm comfortable. We'll get some significant share from them, I hope.
And what percentage of the total cost do you anticipate being covered by the feds?
That's exactly the question. We don't have the answer to that yet. Thank you.
Okay, so do we have any other questions about city transit? Errol?
Unless someone else wants to. Just a couple of things, I guess, for my friend who made the comment. I prefer not to call it urban sprawl. I could prefer to call it people that are moving to the city to start a new life and begin a life. As long as we have that black gushy stuff in the ground, this city is going to grow. It may not grow in the next 2 years because the price of that stuff is low, but it's going to go back up. It will go back up, and when it does, we're talking more drilling, we're talking more jobs, and people are going to move here. So unless we want to start putting signs on all 4 major intersections saying to people, you're not welcome in Calgary, stay back in the east where there are no jobs, people are going to continue to come here. Now, as I said, it's not directly your fault that we don't have the transit. We're building it, it's good. I don't accept the premise that because Toronto is bigger, they have a better transit system. I lived there in 1990, that was over 15 years ago, and they had the transit system then. Our 4 planners simply did not plan. They utterly failed when they built this city. They should have thought 25 years ago that there's enough oil in the ground right now to last well over 500 years. It means people are going to move here. It means there are going to be jobs. They never thought of it. They put a Chinook mall in the middle of the city. It makes no sense to have that mall right in the middle of McLeod Trail. To me, it doesn't. So I guess I would ask you then, are you in favor? Are you of the concept that urban sprawl is a problem that needs to be solved? I mean, until house prices in downtown Calgary, I don't think are going to drop anytime soon, unless there's a crash. It could happen. But I think downtown house prices are always expensive, no matter what. Unless you go to Winnipeg, you can probably get one a lot cheaper. But if you want to live in crime-ridden Winnipeg, go ahead. But I'd rather, there's crime in downtown Calgary, but it's not as bad. I guess there's 2 questions. One, are you of the mindset that this so-called urban sprawl or new people moving to the city is a problem, or do we need to build around it?
No, I'm fundamentally a pro-growth person. I've spent years in economic development. I've been a big promoter of the growth of the city. I think we're an opportunity for people throughout the country, from a guy in northern Manitoba who wants to raise a family in a very blessed and fortunate place. This is the place. I think we are that center of entrepreneurism and success that the country needs. The question is operating and cost. One of the reasons the planners didn't put in huge roads and LRT systems 20 years ago is they didn't have the money. And we don't have the money today to build the systems we would like. So the challenge is operating this and finding the capital to build it in the first place. I represent an urban, suburban place that's growing successfully. Aspen's one of the fastest growing areas of the city, as is West Springs. So we're very happy to see that growth. The hot topic of debate is the density. People enjoy, as I do, the suburban lifestyle. I used to live a block from here. The suburban lifestyle has a lot of appeal for our family. How we properly assess the cost of that, how do we service that area, how do we bring an LRT line to it, how do we provide the services effectively and cost effectively to everyone coming to town. That's the challenge for the municipality. One of the problems is the revenue sources our city requires to grow by 40,000 people a year, 38,900 or something like that, 38,900 a couple of years ago, is there's no match between the revenue that we receive when we grow and the revenue that we need and the people that are coming here. So how do we do that? And typically what smart people are suggesting is that we should get a share of oil royalties. That's the best way to match our requirements for revenue, because when we're growing by that number of people, we have to find homes for thousands of engineers that are moving here to help design these mining operations. So how do we match? And that's one of the reasons we need a revenue source that mirrors when we grow and have fantastic needs for capital improvements and LRT lines and infrastructure to support new suburban communities, versus when we're contracting. And when the price of oil is low and our growth rates fall off, then that reflects it well in terms of the cost of the price of the royalty that we receive, and the share of the royalties received similarly are reduced when the growth is minimized and slows down. So again, we want to match the revenue stream to our growth opportunities.
Just a quick follow.
Sure.
It's going to be really difficult. I agree with you about getting the share on the oil royalties. I just want to follow just this little point. That's it. It's going to be really difficult getting. Nothing to find this in It's going to be really difficult to get, and I agree with you, to get a share from the oil revenues. But it's going to be really difficult to get a share from the oil revenues when you have an energy minister in this province whose chief of staff is registered in Ottawa on the lobbying board for lobbying against pipelines. That's the chief of staff for the energy minister of Alberta. Well, how are you going to have more pipelines and more oil production when the chief of staff of the energy minister is against pipelines in principle? We have a very dangerous government in this province, and they're going to be against oil.
No, that's not the topic today, but thanks.
Sir,
go ahead.
For just a little bit of a rebut to your comments on oil royalty sharing.
Yeah.
Let's say, I would think that the growth of the city should be covered by things like property tax and city tax that businesses have to pay, and not an arbitrary share of oil royalties in a province that isn't necessarily all run out of Calgary. That's a comment. My question was, when are we going to get the train to the airport, and why don't we have that already?
Well, Toronto's just getting theirs, and they're 100 years older than we are.
Right, that we have a train that goes out that distance, but then bypasses around the airport.
That's the way it was designed for people to begin with. The demand isn't quite there yet. There's only 12 million passengers a year at the airport. It will get an LRT. Don't forget, Toronto's got 5 million people. They're 4 million people ahead of us. That's why they have services like that. But I wish you were right, I truly do, that we could fund growth by property taxes. It just doesn't work that way. We have a $5 billion ask right now for transportation infrastructure in the city. That simply can't be covered by property tax. We just simply don't have the resources. It's like a business. To grow it is insanely expensive. The cash needs of a city like this, as they grow 40,000 people a year, we can't grow that quickly. A water treatment plant costs, say, $250,000 or $250 million. Call it $500 million, the latest expansion to Bonnybrook. So typically every 50 years, you'd need a plant of that size. We need them every 10 years to service the growth. We can't possibly do that. There's no way we can do that with property tax. This growth is being fueled by energy. and energy has to support the growth of it. Otherwise, our costs as a city will become ridiculously high. I didn't explain the utility piece very well. A water treatment plant costs, say, $500 million. It can accommodate, say, 500,000 people. So what we need to do is understand that when we grow by perhaps 500,000 people in 10 years, that plant can't be amortized that quickly. We have to build another plant. So right now we're paying for 3 sets of plants within the same lifetime of those plants. We simply don't have the cash to do that. That's the infrastructure cost you don't see. I still haven't explained that. Well, we'll chat afterwards and I'll explain that better.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Any more questions about city transit? Nope. Okay, well, I guess our next step is to...
Are you done? You sure? Yeah. Going once, going twice? So we have a tradition here at Speaker's Corner. We really, yes, a certificate of appreciation. And for those of you who came late, I want to thank and acknowledge Richard, not only for supporting the establishment of Speaker's Corner Calgary, which he did. Yes, we want to thank you, sir, for supporting the establishment of Speaker's Corner Calgary, and I'm going to say a few more words about that, and for taking of your time and effort today to address this vital topic.
Got way off track.
Somewhat, but that's okay. And thanks to your contribution of ideas and energy, we are better able to inform, enlighten, and entertain a more vibrant Calgary. And the audience today has really been treated to an insider's view of some of these issues. Most of us would have had no idea about the topics and the issues and some of the considerations. So we thank you for your insight, and we thank you for your support, and we thank you for being here. And just before I turn it over to you to say whatever you want in conclusion, I just want to, for those of you who showed up late, I had the idea of about 5 years ago to start a Speaker's Corner program, and I initially wrote to the mayor simply for directing me to the appropriate department for licensing. And the mayor put me on to his executive assistant, and there was a string of correspondence, and basically nothing happened. And I felt that I was stonewalled, and it just wasn't moving anywhere. So I was fortunate enough to run into Richard, who also happens to be my alderman, a councillor, excuse me, councillor. It's no longer PC to say alderman. And I commiserated with him that, you know, here's an idea that the time for whose time has come, and it couldn't get anywhere. The following week, I was in with the appropriate people of Parks and Recreations, and who else? Department of Parks, Department of Recreations. A week later, we have our permit, and 3 years in, we have this session. This is the 3rd session. We've had some very stimulating debates. Normally it's a debate format. Normally we have someone speaking in favor of a proposition, someone against. Next week we're going to have 4 people on debating on it's a forum actually, on the economic future of Alberta, but I'm drifting off topic. I just really want to thank you, and thanks for being there for us.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Gabor, for your initiative in starting this. And this is, I think, a really important part of Calgary, the fact that people can come here and chat on international issues and local issues. So credit to you for starting this, and thank you, Elia. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, this lady over here is the lead organizer, and she makes the trains run on time. She builds the trains. And now we're going to default to music. Does anyone want to talk about anything? It's really open forum. At Hyde Park, for example, which is the inspiration for this, people pull up a soapbox and they just rant and rave about whatever irks them or anything they want to talk about. So you have that opportunity here, if anybody wants to. If not, we're going to default to music. Sir. Oh, he's always up for some ranting and raving too. He's a good friend and supporter of Speaker's Corner. Merle Terleski.
Thanks, Councillor. And I was happy to, I'm just going to say some general stuff. I was happy to hear your comments about the sprawl. I think, you know, just a couple minutes here really quick. I think we face a real problem in this city because there are 2 ideologies that are currently in this, maybe a 3rd, but 2 primary ideologies in this city. One ideology says that growth is bad, and with growth comes a whole bunch of bad, so therefore we got to stop it. That's one ideology, which is kind of represented in Occupy, who took over the city park downtown. They're against growth, yet they carry around a cell phone. Without growth, they wouldn't have that cell phone and that iPad that they're carrying around. So that's kind of one ideology. There's another ideology which I say is prevalent. They realize is you have to go out, you have to work at least 7 to 8 hours a day to make a living, to grow a family, to buy a house, and to live in a city. That's, I would say, the primary secondary ideology. There might be a third somewhere in there mixed in. So it's a real, and you have a tough time in council, I know. I ran against Drew Farrell. She is one example of the other ideology. That simply higher taxes will solve everything. I knocked on doors in Drew Farrell's riding, and people would look at me and say, what are you going to do about my carrot peelings? I said, I don't know, bury them in your backyard. I'm not going to go out and raise people's taxes so you can have someone come to your door and pick up your carrot peelings. And he says, well, I don't mind if my taxes go up. And I said, well, you may not mind, but a whole bunch of people in Calgary do mind. And I think we fail, and the reason I brought up that energy minister's chief of staff, it's going to play a big role in this city. If you are the Minister of Energy for Alberta, and your chief of staff is registered as a lobbyist against oil, I'll finish here. If your chief of staff is registered against the single biggest producer of wealth in this city, and is registered to lobby against that, that's a real big problem when you're the energy minister and you're going to sit down with oil companies that want to bring billions of dollars into this province, and your chief of staff, who generally runs who the energy meets with and energy minister meets with and doesn't meet with. There's another minister in our NDP government that is on video yelling, no more approvals, no more approvals. Mr. Edgar, I think his name is. That means no more pipeline approvals. He's on video chanting that. So that is the government we have in this province right now that is against pipelines, is against oil growth, and yet we're supposed to grow. So I think those are some of the dilemmas we face.
Actually, we've strayed a long way from transit into water treatment plants. So I still want to get back to you. I wasn't really prepped to give that clarity, but it's a true utilities cost to the growth that we'll come back to later. Carrot peelings. We've just invested a significant amount of money in a composter. And people are wondering why we're spending tens of millions of dollars to do that, and why are we going to charge you $3 for a green box in the future? And I'm just going to take this opportunity with Gabber's license here, if you let me go ahead. Thanks, Gabber. This is going to be an election issue in 2017. People are already gearing up. The city tested the green box program in 4 communities around the city. I represent one of them, Cougar Ridge. 85% satisfaction with having composters and having green boxes. Why? Why would we pay money for that? Why would we put money into that? It's about the landfill cost. It's not about the $4 a month for your green box. It's about what the cost of a section of land is, leaving it for basically a garbage dump for the next generation. The decommissioning costs of a landfill are now estimated through the life of that landfill at Spy Hill or in Foothills to be $50 to $100 million for the environmental cleanup. That's what this is about. Composting will take 65% of the stuff that we send to a landfill and reuse it because it can be composted. The composter will be able to take bones and meat and grease and all the rest of it, so that you will be able to save over the long run in exchange for your monthly fee significant sums of money. So there's also a huge environmental argument to be had, but in fact I believe, to address your issue in terms of why would I have to pay for that, that's why. It's that background cost, which we've done a very poor job of explaining to the public, but that message will hopefully come out more clearly over time. Yes? Sorry, you thought you'd wrap this up, didn't you? Okay. Sure, of course.
Wrong one. Wrong one. Short my cord, but sure.
Just 2 things. One is another new topic, I guess. First off, I really support the development of bike lanes in the city. I think they do a good thing in allowing...
I did too, offside with a few people in the ward I represent, but I think it's the right direction. Do you know the mayor of Chicago has demanded 300 kilometers of bike lanes? They're a winter city. In fact, their winters are worse than ours. And the mayor has decided he needs to do that. Why? Because he wants to attract people to work in Chicago, and the sorts of people he wants to attract don't believe in not having bike lanes. Let's leave it at that way.
Right, I do think though that we need to not have them on 8th Avenue. That is a pedestrian zone.
We're testing it there. I walked it with the mayor the other day and we were watching what's going on. We're going to listen to the merchants, we're going to listen to the people, but at noon hour, which I walk just about daily, taking a look, the cyclists aren't coming onto 8th Avenue during peak time. If that's your worry. That was our concern too. But we're checking it out. This is a pilot. If it works, great. If it doesn't, no more.
Sure, I mean, that should be an area where I can look at my cell phone and wander without getting hit by a bike.
Oh, no, I'm thinking seriously of a distracted walking bylaw for just people like you.
All right. The second thing, in response to your, again, the share of oil royalties, I think if you have a share of revenue, you will always, not always, but it's easy to find projects to fit that revenue, rather than having a need for water filtration, like you said, and having those projects reviewed on an as-needed basis. I think you'll end up spending less money doing it that way.
The chap that spoke earlier, that's the counterpoint for sure, and there's a certain amount of truth to it, but by the same token, the key issue for Calgarians used to be public safety, now it's traffic congestion. So we know from polling that the public really is getting tired. And I know a lot of people in the suburban areas are finding their productivity is being impacted, their health is being impacted by the long commutes. Now compared to an Atlanta or a Toronto or a Vancouver, we're nowhere. But here's the challenge on revenue. Vancouver didn't surprise a lot of people, it surprised me a little bit more maybe, that they have congestion to the level that it's impaired their #1 ranking as a city in the world. And it's been ranked down a little bit in large part because of the congestion. And yet the population voted against a transportation levy to help pay for improved transit costs. That gives politicians a headache, because while people protest the problem, unwilling or ill-prepared to pay for the solution. Welcome to the challenges of running a big city. And so I don't know how we reconcile those expressed concerns with offering a solution that doesn't meet the test. I don't know the answer to that at this point.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for coming out. We'll put on a few tunes as we rip them down. And next week, as Gabor mentioned, we will have a forum. The forum is on Alberta's economic crisis. What is the way forward? So please, we look forward to having a lot of people coming out for that one. This is something that affects us all personally, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people have to say next week. Thank you.
Mention meetup.